After Donald Trump and J.D. Vance embarrassed the United States by attacking Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, many people are asking whether or not this was a setup. Did Donald Trump and J.D. Vance stage a coordinated attack or an ambush against one of our allies? Now, I've made my opinion known. I think it's probably more likely than not that this was some sort of setup. I think Donald Trump and J.D. Vance wanted to spin up this narrative that they were the big, bad, tough guys, and Zelensky was just here mooching off the American taxpayer dollar. That's the narrative they have been trying to sell for years now, and it just makes a whole lot of sense that they would bring Zelensky into the White House and stage this coordinated attack against them. And there are just so many other things that don't really make a whole lot of sense that we should probably look at. And we can go ahead and start by Donald Trump welcoming Zelensky to the White House. Listen to the first thing he says to Zelensky here when he gets out of his vehicle.
You're all dressed up.
Yes, I had many clothes. How are you? Pretty sure.
He's all dressed up today.
President Trump, what's your message to Vladimir Putin, sir? President Trump.
He's all dressed up today. Now, why would this be the very first thing that Donald Trump thought it appropriate to say to Zelensky? Why would he be poking fun at Zelensky's clothing as the very first order of business? This is something that I wasn't wanting to cover because this is a distraction. The whole idea behind Zelensky isn't dressed properly for the White House is absolutely ludicrous because Zelensky is showing solidarity with the forces on the ground in Ukraine, and it is more than appropriate for him to wear this attire to show solidarity with the Ukrainian troops. But Donald Trump and J.D. Vance wanted to make a spectacle out of this. Donald Trump in particular is now criticizing Zelensky for what he is wearing before their meeting even begins. And then during the meeting, Marjorie Taylor Greene's boyfriend asked this question.
Second question.
My second question for President Zelensky. Why don't you wear a suit? Why don't you wear a suit? You're at the highest level in this country's office and you refuse to wear a suit. Just want to see if do you own a suit?
Yeah, problems.
A lot of Americans have problems with you not respecting
I don't
the
have
dignity
such.
of this office.
I will wear a costume after this war will finish.
Okay.
Yes, maybe one.
Maybe something like this.
something like
Yes,
yours.
sir.
Yes.
That'd be great.
Maybe something better. I don't know.
So we have Brian, what's his name? Brian Glenn asking, do you have a suit? Why aren't you wearing a suit? You're in the company of the President of the United States. Why aren't you wearing a suit? Now, I'm not sure if J.D. Vance and Donald Trump spoke with Brian Glenn beforehand, but this was a deliberate attempt to undermine and demean Zelensky. Since when is this an appropriate question to ask another world leader at a time of war, when he is wearing clothing to show solidarity with his people back home? Since when is this type of question okay? Why is it okay that Zelensky comes into the Oval Office and is expected to sit there as people demean him, as J.D. Vance and Donald Trump talk down to him, as they parrot Russian talking points? It all just doesn't make a whole lot of sense. It all kind of seems like there was some coordination to try to spin up this narrative for the MAGA base so they could have a little bit of red meat to chew on. They wanted to make Zelensky appear as though he was some sort of mooch or something. And they were discussing this on CNN after this meeting went down, and they're just talking about, you know, how this plays into Donald Trump's reality TV world. And just really think about what she says here. And if you guys do appreciate my work, please do remember to subscribe.
And he says, look, I know Schumer changed the dress code, but letting someone in the Senate chamber dressed like this really crosses the line. It is amazing to me that this is even a conversation that we are having.
That's right. And it is just a total fall into the Trump reality television show that was his plan from the beginning. He is a top marketing. I would say he would run a phenomenal agency, social media agency as well. But the fact that this is what continues to get airwaves and real estate in our minds when it comes to the fact that we are now regressing back to another chapter in the Cold War is so stunning to us. Churchill came to the White House during World War II in his military garb. We have seen our elected officials go to post-natural disaster zones wearing windbreakers. Zelensky is in the middle of a war, and it is fully appropriate.
Yeah, and she's exactly right. And we have a multitude of examples from history that we can look at. It is totally appropriate for Zelensky to be wearing what he is wearing to show solidarity with his people back home. That's why Joe Biden shows up in windbreakers after hurricane disasters. We all inherently understand this. So why was it made such a huge point in the Oval Office? Why were they so intent on picking on Zelensky, bullying Zelensky? Because they wanted to craft this narrative. As she said, Donald Trump lives in a reality TV bubble. That is how his mind thinks. And so if he can spin up this narrative that Zelensky is showing up to the White House and not showing us respect because he's dressed down, and then he further disrespected us because he asked JD a question that started this whole 10-minute argument, well, then that sells really good to the MAGA base. And that is exactly why I think that it's more likely than not that this was an actual setup, that this was a coordinated attack, because Donald Trump knew that if he could make this narrative stick, then it would help him with the MAGA base. That's why it was so interesting to see all of the Republicans who came out after this Oval Office shit show, and they started parroting the exact same talking point. It's like the message went out, and the defense of Donald Trump was made clear, because this was the narrative that they wanted to spin. We'll move on to how the right does make fun of Zelensky as some sort of cosplay, right? They've been doing this now for a while, trying to make fun of his clothing.
I actually think that Churchill analogy, first of all, it's been made before. And when the war started, a lot of people said that he was channeling a sort of Churchillian aesthetic by basically signaling to his people as their commander-in-chief that they were in a war, right? And now it's become, I think, for the right, a symbol that he is cosplaying as a military hero when he's not.
Well, let's talk about what's most important. That was disgraceful, disgusting, disrespectful, dangerous, and bad for not just Ukraine, but bad for American national security. It felt un-American. It felt traitorous. I've never seen a reaction from veterans of all backgrounds like I have in the last couple of hours to that disgusting, demoralizing display. So I don't even want to focus too much on what was worn. I want to focus on what was said and what happened. And that was a real low point for American leadership. And right now, it also, importantly, to focus on, makes America less safe. Our allies are less supportive. We have more people around the world who hate us. And America, in my view, hasn't been this isolated since I and many others invaded Iraq. And I think that's what we have to focus on, is that America is less safe today because of that.
Yeah, and he's exactly right. And he makes an excellent point that focusing on what Zelensky was wearing during this meeting is a distraction. This is what they want to use to distract the American public while Donald Trump makes his turn towards Russia and Putin. It's all a distraction. It's all about narratives. It's all about spinning up a black and white picture that the MAGA base can glom onto. That is what this was all about. That's why I continue to say that I think it was an ambush. And Paul Rieckhoff here, he pretty much is saying the same thing. It pretty much smells like an ambush.
It wasn't just a mistake. It was an ambush. I mean, this was a plan. This was a politically calculated ambush from all sides, right? No one would feel comfortable walking into an environment like that from any country, and no one should be treated that way. From the reporter to the greeting to the mocking of his clothes, it was beneath America and beneath the White House to treat a guest in our country and a leader who is actively engaged in combat, who is right now losing his fellow service members, who's losing his women and children. His cities are being bombed. And we're talking about his clothes, and we're talking to him that way. It was victim shaming, which is what Trump has been doing to Zelensky in Ukraine since before he got elected. It's unacceptable, it's inappropriate, and it's also undermining not just Ukraine, but our own national security. We are now aligned with the bad guys. Russia is the bad guy, Ukraine is the good guy. And when we continue to attack Ukraine and defend Russia, that puts us in line with the bad guys, which is not where America wants to be.
He's exactly right. And if you take a look at the American populace, there is still a little bit more than a majority that support Ukraine. Most Americans are not in line with Russia. They understand that Putin is a murderous dictator. So the American people are not interested in the turn towards Putin. But Donald Trump and J.D. Vance are now using this whole confrontation in the Oval Office to distract you, to undermine Zelensky, because he wants to make that turn. And I think it needs to be said. Zelensky can wear whatever the hell he wants to wear to show solidarity with his people back home, but he is a brave man who is standing up for all of Ukraine. He still enjoys more than 55 or close to 60% of popular support in his own country. And when he was told that he needed to be evacuated out of Ukraine when the war first started, he said, "No, I am staying here. If my people are here, I am here." And that is the type of leader that most people look up to. But instead, the United States and the Trump administration took a completely different route and tried to demean him, tried to mock him, tried to make him sound like he was disrespectful to Donald Trump, because they want you to lose support in this Ukraine thing because Donald Trump is more interested in getting in bed with Putin. And we'll just look at one final clip here. It is really quite astonishing that suit question was even asked. Why did Brian Glenn even ask this question at all? And this guy makes a really good point.
And they have no credibility to talk about decorum. I mean, the reason why this question was asked is because this so-called reporter from One American News was there. Why was this person even in the room? Why was there a reporter from the Russian news agency TASS, state media from Russia, in the room in the Oval Office? That's what I'm talking about when I talk about the incompetence of this administration. And yet you can't have the Associated Press there because Trump doesn't like them because they won't refer to the
I've actually escorted media into the Oval Office. It was part of my job.
I know,
and you know it is
we don't
absolute
care. Hold on a
chaos
second.
when the foreign media is there.
If you can't control whether the Russian news agency is allowed to come into the Oval Office, one of the most protected spaces in the country, then you don't have the moral credibility or even the intellectual ability to be able to run the White House.
And just think about how insane that is. You have Russian state media allowed into the Oval Office during this Zelensky meeting, while AP and Reuters were not allowed in. And it just goes to show the huge shift, the tectonic shift that is currently happening right now in the MAGA world. They are aligning themselves with Putin, even though most Americans are not down with that. And because Americans do not find that a good way to go, they spin up these narratives, these black and white pictures, this red meat for the base to chew on, to ruffle up a little bit more support for what Trump is doing. Because as he is aligning with Putin, he is throwing our allies to the wayside. And it's just absolutely insane that you have Russian media in the White House, you have an American reporter who is demeaning Zelensky by asking him, "Why aren't you wearing a suit?" And then you have Donald Trump and J.D. Vance going on the attack like a bunch of fifth-grade bullies to try to undermine another world leader, an ally of the United States. It's all just, I feel like it all just kind of meshes together to show this turn towards the Kremlin. All of these different things, just kind of, the pieces kind of fit together to paint this picture that Donald Trump is trying to turn us away from our allies while he's getting in bed with Russia. That is what is going on here. So I thought this was very interesting. It's a sad, sad day in America. Like I've mentioned before, I don't think I've ever been as embarrassed as I am right now to be an American. What Donald Trump did to Zelensky in the Oval Office was just downright atrocious, and they should all be ashamed of themselves. This is not how the United States should be treating our friends and our allies. So I will leave it there for now, guys. If you guys got anything out of this video, please do remember to smash that like button and subscribe. Maybe share with a friend or two. I'd very much appreciate that. We've got to build something here on the left that can adequately push back against this right-wing media ecosystem that just shovels this shit every single day for Donald Trump without any pushback at all. So if you do appreciate what I do here, please do remember to subscribe. If you want to see the full breakdown of this argument that they had in the Oval Office with Zelensky, go ahead and watch that video on the screen now. We go through the entire argument and what kind of led up to it. Otherwise, I'll see you guys on the next one.